My name's Pete Eberle, and I'm with the Northern Chapter of the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, or NCRES, and of course we're a chapter of CRES. For those of you who are not familiar, CRES and our local chapters provide education, policy advocacy, and community engagement that accelerate the adoption of all forms of renewable energy, energy efficiency, high performance building, energy storage, and emerging technologies that will help Colorado reach 100% renewable energy. CRES is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we just work here in Colorado, of course. If you're interested in more information, you can go to our website at cres-energy.org. That's CRES-energy.org, where you can sign up for our email list, find links to our social media, as well as go to our YouTube channel that contains, I think we're over 60 videos of previous presentations, as well as recent webinars. We probably even have more now as we're adding many of the webinars that we've been conducting over the last year. And you can also, if you're interested in supporting us, we do have sustaining membership levels, as well as you can just make a basic donation as well to help us keep this program going and other programs like it. I'd also want to give a quick round of thanks to our Northern Colorado business sponsors that include Platte River Power Authority, Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, Solaris Energy, and Sandbox Solar. And speaking of Sandbox, we do have an announcement next Monday, June 28th from 10 to 2 p.m. They are doing the ribbon cutting on their new Waterglen solar project in Fort Collins. I will send out a note on that announcement if you wish to RSVP and attend to the attendee list after the meeting, as well as a follow-up. Diego Lopez with Northern Colorado Clean Cities has an announcement as well. So no need to furiously scribble. We'll get those to you after the meeting. And on top of that, we do have just two quick upcoming CRES events. On Thursday, July 15th at 7 p.m., the Metro Denver chapter, MD CRES, will be hosting a webinar, the Denver Parks and Recreation Resiliency Program with Jessica Anderson. So if you are interested in learning about what Denver parks are doing to try to create a more resilient, park system within the urban environment, that'll be a good one. And then on Tuesday, July 27th at 7 p.m., NCRES will be having a presentation by Jacqueline Cochran of NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, on the Los Angeles 100% Renewable Energy Study, also known as LA 100. This is one of their most recent and comprehensive studies, where they did rigorous integrated engineering and economic analysis for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power regarding their goals to achieve 100% renewable energy. And the results showed that meeting LA's goal of reliable 100% electricity by 2045, which is their current goal, but even by 2035, which is a stretch goal, is achievable but will require rapid deployment of wind, solar, and storage technologies in this decade. So that's something that we've really been pushing on here at CRES, is really accelerating adoption, just getting as much gains as we can, as fast as we can, to offset, not just carbon in the near term, but really try to drive that down. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Diego Lopez, who's the Executive Director of Northern Colorado Clean Cities, which supports the adoption of EVs and charging infrastructure throughout Northern Colorado, and is a sister organization to the Denver Metro's Clean Cities Coalition. Diego?
Excellent. Thank you so much for the great introduction and the opportunity to speak to NCRES today. Well, today, we'll have a really first discussion on equity in Colorado, and in particular, how electrification can change towards a more equitable system. So some of the questions that I hope that we'll be able to answer today is that what does an equitable transportation system look like? What are the considerations around increasing EV accessibility of rural, underserved, and diverse communities? And then what are some of the current programs and strategies to increase equitable access to these communities? And so let's go ahead and start off with that first question. What does an equitable transportation system look like? And I think the first thing that we can do is frame the transportation equity problem. As of right now, what we have noticed is that low-income communities, particular of color, are disproportionately exposed to air pollution and impacted by climate change. Local air pollution is associated with early death, lower education attainment, and lower lifetime earnings. In addition, low-income households spend about a third of their income on transportation. Here's around 29% in comparison to higher income community members. So what we're going to see is that low-income households drive vehicles that are 15% less fuel efficient than high-income households. So that means per mile, it is more expensive to drive. They typically also drive older cars that have a tendency then to break down more frequently, adding cost, and then that could put their employment at risk. So I think that when we're talking about electrification, when we're talking about the improvement of our transportation system, I believe that low-income community members of color in particular have the most to benefit from replacing gasoline to EVs. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of equity before, and maybe even have seen this image where equality is shown, where everybody gets the same resources. Equity is shown where there's a disproportionate amount of resources. But I think in terms of the audience here, I think we all understand that there's a reality where certain community members have more resources and some do not have any to start with. And so with that being said, what can we do? I think that it's really important then to put into definition what is equity, what is equality, and then maybe another term to bring in is liberation. So equality first aims to promote fairness. A really good example is a tax credit. Everybody supposedly can have access to that tax credit. However, if you're looking at low-income individuals, if you're looking at other situations, you're not going to be able to leverage that tax credit. So in terms of promoting electric vehicle adoption, going towards an equal solution is perhaps not as desired. Equity perhaps is something that we need to look towards, where it demands that individuals' needs are taken into consideration. Their identity, their race, ethnicity, ability, nationality, their gender, their circumstances are looked towards that may otherwise hinder the success of one's participation. And what we would like to bring in is liberation. Living in liberation means that there are no barriers. We have access to what we need and no one is being held back up or down. So we're hopefully going to go through perhaps some strategies on how we can produce a more equitable solution towards electrification. So what are the considerations around increasing EV accessibility of rural, underserved, and diverse communities? First, the core principles have to include the actual voices in the community. It has to look towards their actual transportation needs and not speaking to them. Funding for outreach in disadvantaged communities also is going to be critical. There shouldn't just be funding for the technology themselves. There should also be funding for the actual education and awareness. In particular, given that there's a commonly held stereotype that electric vehicles are for certain kinds of people. Equity programs should be incorporated to provide comprehensive solutions that address all the components of clean transportation. So we shouldn't just see funding for used electric vehicles, for instance. We should also see funding for charging infrastructure and improvements on the grid. If any one of those components are not accessible, readily available, electrification will not occur. So how do we actually engage the underserved communities? First, we have to actually incorporate community engagement in planning. So not just, again, having funding for the technologies themselves, but also engagement within the local organizations that are trusted. So leveraging the trusted organizations is a very key factor of how we can proliferate electrification. With that, I think then we can listen better to what a community needs rather than, again, telling them what they want, telling them what they need. Lastly, we need to identify barriers that reduce representation at events and meetings. So in particular, we need to have translation, Spanish translation. You need to pick meetings with maybe ADA compliance. You need to record meetings for those that are working and not able to join at that time. So these are all solutions, again, towards planning and awareness and education campaigns. But there are also some near-term solutions that I hope to also expand on. But we need to expand messaging beyond EVs as well. This is a small portion of my presentation, but I'm also a enormous encourager of alternative modes of transportation and technologies that can be adopted. So we need to fund, in addition to light-duty electric vehicles, heavy-duty electric vehicles for transit, for school buses. We need to electrify bikes, and we also need to support human transportation. So more roads and infrastructure for those modes of transportation. Lastly, how to engage. I think the largest barrier, in addition to the communication, will be the, in fact, cost of EVs. I think most of you may know that over the course of 10 years, an electric vehicle could be, in fact, cheaper than its gas counterpart. However, 10 years is probably too large of a gap for these communities. We need to, in fact, reduce the upfront cost of new vehicles with incentives and financing assistance. We need to challenge the EV purchase incentives that delay discounts, that don't have refundable federal tax credits. We need to produce essentially funding mechanisms that benefit across the board, everybody across the board. We also need to expand funding for the used EV market. I understand that the used EV market is actually expanding already. I've already seen, for instance, like a 2014 Nissan Leaf at around like $10,000. So we're already seeing some expansion into that market, and hopefully that will be a pretty large solution and an entry for low-income community members. In addition to that, we need to have just funding for EV charging infrastructure in low-income and underserved communities. I think that's the most important, so they're not competing against urban communities that perhaps have more resources, that have been earlier adopters. So we need to have separate funding mechanisms just for those low income and underserved communities. And again, having increased funding for EV education and awareness is key. So the next question that we can answer are what are the current programs and strategies? Some of you might already know of some of these strategies, but I will review again some of the things that are specifically having an equity focus. So within the Colorado Electric Vehicle Plan, the Colorado Energy Office has actually conducted, they're still conducting, and I believe Cambridge Systematics will be coming out with a EV equity study quite soon, and it will define and map communities, including rural, EV registrations and EV accessibility, including language barriers. So we're going to use, hopefully, that study to address a lot of these problems that we're seeing. And hopefully this is not the last equity conversation that we will have. When that EV equity study comes out, let's go ahead and have another conversation about those findings. An additional action that we're seeing is that CDOT will work to integrate those recommendations along with the other departments, Department of Transportation, Regional Air Quality Council, Department of Health and Environment. In addition to that, they will have a separate medium and heavy duty electrification plan. And it will specifically address environmental justice and equity communities, informed by CO's study. So these are all studies that we're going to look into, and again, hopefully will increase our conversation. Lastly, we wanted to mention action number 4, CO's intervention in the Public Utility Commission proceedings for transportation electrification plans. So they're ordering, again, these utilities to have a focus on low-income customers. And we'll actually, in a bit, review Xcel Energy's transportation electrification plan and what it does to address equity. But in addition to the Colorado Energy Office's electric vehicle plan, they have actually come out with, and I'm sure some of you have known of it, the Charge Ahead Colorado grant. And this is open to the public. We are helping currently rural communities, scenic byways, workplaces, multifamily units to apply for the Charge Ahead Colorado grant. It's $9,000 for level 2, up to $50,000 for a level 3. And again, hopefully that we're going to educate more and more communities, underserved communities, to apply for this grant. In addition to, again, the large state plans that we're finding, we're also finding smaller community plans. Denver, within their electrification plan, will address EV equity. In addition, City of Fort Collins, within their EV readiness roadmap, have analyzed charging locations for low-income residents, and in particular that reside within multifamily dwellings. They will also have an updated public charging infrastructure with a flat rate of $1 an hour. I think that will also be a pretty big solution, again, addressing EVs, but also addressing charging. In addition to that, they are requiring multifamily developers to install EV conduits. What we're finding is that single family homes have no problem adopting EVs and charging stations, but those that are in multifamily units have that difficulty. So requiring them to install those EV conduits is a really big win. Finally, something that will also be an update maybe later on, we will be working with the City of Fort Collins on an EV group buy that will discount the prices of EVs sold. So again, another solution to decrease the cost. So one of the last plans that I wanted to review as well are, in addition to municipalities, what are utilities doing to invest in electrification and in particular, increasing equity? So if we're looking at Xcel Energy, they just passed their transportation electrification plan. I implore everybody to look at it. It will have $102 million investment over 3 years. And in particular, they'll fund charging hubs, so multiple charging locations in low-income communities. They'll have electric mobility services, car shares, ride shares, e-bikes and scooters, which is a lot better as an entry point for EVs instead of just purchasing the EV outright. But they will also do some important things as well for transit buses, school buses, and electrifying them. One criticism that I will have is that they have rebates for EV charging in low income areas. Although it is great that they have funding for low income areas, my concern is that a rebate, which means that you purchase the item first, then get funding back, might be a barrier. Again, we spoke about having the discount at the point of purchase as being perhaps a solution for those in low income areas. Lastly, they will support economic recovery. And I think that is important when we're talking about electric vehicles, in particular maintenance. We need more technicians. We need more individuals to maintain the vehicles. And so hopefully this is a slight benefit, side benefit that we're going to see in addition to the environment benefits and the lower cost of transportation. Lastly, something that I wanted to specifically highlight, of the $102 million, there will be $16 million specifically for, they're assuming 772 charging ports for low-income communities. So that's a lot of charging ports. What I hope that will decrease the general barrier of charging and finding a charging station, and that will also benefit the EV owners as a whole, and not just those in the low-income market. One last thing that I always like to show here is that the utility EV investment is just a benefit to the entire system as a whole. The more EVs that we produce, the more EVs that we use, the higher electricity sales. The higher electricity sales during the off-peak times, that's why smart chargers are so important, the better the utilization of the grid assets will be. And then that will in turn increase revenues for outpaced costs. And then that will increase, again, more funding for EVs, EV charging stations as well. So what I'm hoping is that this is a cyclical cycle that will just increase electric vehicle adoption across the board, and not just siloed within one particular community. So a little overview and next steps here. Just an overview of some of the most important strategies. We have to be proactive in the coordination between, again, vehicle and infrastructure programs. We have to increase trust, in particular using local community members and leveraging local organizations, in particular with unfamiliar technologies. We need to look towards EV infrastructure projects that pair with affordable housing, multifamily housing. And then we need to develop additional partnerships with utilities, EV station providers, and again, affordable housing organizations. In addition, we need to increase funding for vehicle ownership for new and used vehicles, diversify the EV market, especially for transit and school buses. We need to increase funding for dealership engagement, in particular for their inventory, in particular for their used vehicle inventory. We need to also look towards alternative mobility options, car shares, ride shares, mass transit. And then we need to look towards utility investment in EV charging infrastructure. So lastly, what I like to cover is some of our own next steps. Our own organizations, Northern Colorado Clean Cities, will have free advising. We offer free advising for any person, any community that has questions about EVs. We want to enhance our efforts within multimodal transportation. So you'll hopefully see us within more school bus and transit efforts. We need to and will increase EV charging at multi-unit dwellings, continue to support reduction of emissions, start translating our documents to Spanish and other languages, and then continuing the equity discussion. So lastly, these are your action items. Speak with your colleagues. Let's actually speak today about ways that we can increase equity. Let's make a pledge, in particular with your organization, whether it's a short-term or long-term goal, to increase equity. And then let's attend the next webinar again when the EV equity study comes out. Let's have additional conversations about where our goals are and best practices are. So I'll leave it back to everybody else. How do you want to see EV development incorporate equity?
Thanks, Diego. So we already have a couple queued up here. So here's the first one. Have any communities experimented with the idea of public EV charging stations with the cost correlated to the neighborhood income property values, i.e. poor neighborhoods have free public chargers, where affluent neighborhoods have public chargers which cost, whatever per hour?
That's a great question. So what I know is within the EV study, they are studying that. We have the data accessible to us. With the DMV data, we can actually show where the most electric vehicles are being adopted. For right now, though, I don't think that there are incentives in particular for, let's say, you come in with your card and it has that zip code and it gives you a discount. I don't think that there is an actual program for that. Although I will say that there is a car share and a ride share program that is associated with your zip code and the area that you live in. So ride shares and car shares are a solution. But let's just say that one devil's advocate would say it's not as convenient as having a private transportation.
Great. Well, the next comment is about, lots of great ideas, particularly the building trust and using existing organizations being critical. But where is there, it seems like most of the funding and the activities around is getting people in cars and getting chargers. But what's happening? Is there funding for that trust building? And where do you, if there isn't, where do you see that coming from?
That's a good question. So I would think, okay, so there's maybe two parts to that question. There are two parts to the answer. Currently, there is not direct funding for, let's say, a large entity, a statewide entity, to go to a smaller entity and help them with an electrification plan. There are, let's see here. There is funding though for municipalities, but there's a barrier because there's a cost share for the city. Usually it's around 20%. So when we're talking about, the outreach, yes, it is there. But because there's a cost share, if we give you $100,000, we're requesting 20%. So you have to come up with $20,000 for the investment of education and awareness. Some communities do not have that $20,000. So what is a solution? We have free EV advising. So up to a certain extent, Northern Colorado Clean Cities and Denver Metro Clean Cities will leverage the National Renewable Energy Lab to produce some type of electric vehicle analysis, EV analysis, EV advising. So with that being said, we are probably your go-to free resource.
Okay, and is there any interest among rural area municipal governments to own and operate fast charging stations for the benefit of both local residents and through travelers?
Very much so. So Fort Morgan in particular, we just helped them with the installation of a charging station within their community center. Granted, it's 2 level 2 charging stations, so they're not level 3, that is something that we'll probably have to find a different stakeholder. But to your point, are rural communities supportive of charging, of electrification plans? Absolutely. But I will say the demand rates and the concern of the out-of-pocket costs due to the charging is a concern. And so that is why I think in particular the utility has an even bigger place within the electrification, because if they can decrease the actual cost per kilowatt hour, if they can include maybe solar, or if they have other solutions, perhaps these rural communities will adopt level 3 charging stations as well. But overall, if they could, they would adopt level 3. But at this particular time, they felt level 2 was adequate. But to your point, they see an enormous benefit to their local economy of having charging stations there.
I'm going to add on just a quick follow on. Do you see the rural electric associations possibly stepping in on that front, because they really have a benefit, and obviously they're good with electrical infrastructure?
Yes, and so that's why, you know what, everybody, please go to the Mountain Park Electric Ride and Drive, and let's please tell Mountain Park Electric how much we want, EVs. With just their support of the ride and drive, I think, to answer your question, yes, there are a lot of rural communities, rural utilities that are adopting charging stations, and they're leveraging the Charge Ahead Colorado grant in particular. So I'm excited, again, for Mountain Park Electric and for the others as well.
Okay, great. So basically, with vehicle to grid technology advancing and virtual power plants really kind of becoming a reality, in that mode, EVs are technically worth or economically worth more to the grid than they cost. Why not pay EV owners for that value? And that just seems like a funding mechanism to get low-income folks in the cars. Is that something that you see happening?
Absolutely. I am such a big supporter of demand energy resources being implemented, in particular for rural communities, not only to decrease, not only for the economic reasons, but I think also to increase resiliency. Just to again, the point of having reliable charge is a pretty big issue and barrier. So very much, I think that that could be in the future, as battery packs become larger, they can become a larger asset to the EV owners. Now, granted, again, my question is always, what is the actual cost upon entry? So there's a magic. The reason why you don't see solar, for instance, on EVs is because the amount of energy that we'll get from it in relation to the cost is just not worth it. Yes, you'll get maybe, let's say over the course of maybe like a week, you'll get, a kilowatt. You only get a certain amount, but that will increase the cost of the EV itself. So what I'm just concerned with, or just my future concern are potentially these demand response energy resources potentially increasing the cost of entry. I'm hoping that it's not. I'm hoping that they will realize the return on investment, but we shall see. We need to do the best studies. We need to do the studies ahead of time. Good question. Great.
Well, here's another really good question. The best-selling EV in the world is now the Wuling Huangdong. I might be probably butchering that. It costs less than $5,000. It is possible to make cheap, low-range EVs that are great for cities, such as this car is designed for. Some EV startups are trying to do this. What about ways to encourage the manufacture of low-cost EVs, obviously for urban environments, and extra incentives for the lower-cost EVs? Don't, if you're going to buy a Model S, you don't really need help buying a Model S.
Right, right. That's so I'm so torn because yes, just get more EVs out there. And generally people, upon our surveys, 50 to 60 miles in a day. So 100-mile range even is really reaching their needs. However, every now and then when I go to rural communities, I get the thumbs down from people because they do drive longer distances. For low-income community members in particular as well, they drive longer distances to employment. And so with that being said, does the 100-mile range meet their needs? Or does the 250-mile range that is now being kind of more of the standard right now, you're seeing more and more of a 200 plus wanting to be the goal, is that going to meet all of our needs? So, again, this is also why I'm a big proponent of human powered transportation, of mass transportation. There needs to be multiple modes, multiple options to meet their needs. So I would support that. I would definitely support the investment of those smaller vehicles. But again, to the point of, let me play one more devil's advocate for dealerships. It costs them money to have EVs on the lot. And so even if they have a lot of low-priced, mid-ranged EVs, it is a gamble per vehicle to have on that lot versus a mid-range price vehicle that's maybe like, let's say, a hybrid. So, I want to play devil's advocate for so many different kind of stakeholders here, but to that point, that means that all of these different stakeholders have a vested interest in providing some of these solutions. So manufacturers need to understand that dealerships have a difficult time having these EVs on the lot. They may need to decrease those costs. And then, yes, produce more EVs, different types of EVs. Good question. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well, it's a tough one, it's and you bring up the car dealer situation. There's a lot of challenges with any transition like this. I wonder if they were saying that when they stopped selling horse buggies. I don't know.
Very much, or their transcontinental railroad. Is that what they were saying? Is this going in the right direction? So, that's what I'm hoping for. And we're getting more and more. Let's just say this. As an indication. Last year, we had 200 charging stations requested on average within each Charge Ahead Colorado grant round. So 200 charging stations being funded. This year, we have 300. So it's and last year it was the year before that it was less. So we're just seeing more and more popularity within electric vehicles. We're seeing more demand, but then with that we need to see some other solutions for equity.
Okay, great. Well, just a statement regarding the new Ford F-150, which can, on vehicle to grid, because it is enabled with an inverter, can dump 100 kilowatts back. That's a lot of grid services, a lot of storage.
3 days worth of your utility. So usually a home requires 29 kilowatts ish, and that's like 70 kilowatts. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity. Now this is maybe a next topic for you guys. Can you bring in Xcel Energy or can you bring in Ford to describe how does that system actually work? Does it work as a credit? Does it work in real time? How does that actually work? That is a question that I'm having.
Yeah, I think that's when we've had previous discussion in years past on this, that's always been the crux is, and yeah, how do you get compensated for cycling your battery? There's concern
Same
around
with
that.
demand response, energy resources, the demand energy resources, the extra batteries or the solar. I mean, they're doing it by credits now. Is that the most effective way? Is that the most efficient way? Equitable way as well? Again, after the fact, rebates are generally not great for low-income communities. So we need to look at maybe a different paradigm.
Yeah, and just while we have a little bit of time, I was going to get your thoughts. I mean, I just notice here in Fort Collins, as somebody that rides my pedal bicycle pretty much everywhere, um, I'm just blown away by how many people I'm seeing on e-bikes and people that are very clearly commuting to work. So I'm hoping it's vehicle replacement. Have you seen, or is there anyone studying that? Because and I've got like one buddy in Denver who's a public school teacher who's gotten an e-bike because he's figured out a way. It's actually faster for him on the trail doing his 20 miles an hour than trying to drive. Have you seen any trends or data on that front?
So I want to, and I know this is not a trend, but so this is a little sneak peek. Let's see here. And I know this is on topic, but off topic. So I will talk about data. So Can Do Colorado, I'll go into data first. Can Do Colorado is probably the best resource that is developing information studies on electric bikes. In particular, electric bikes being used by those in low income essential worker community groups. Now that's a mouthful. I just put into the chat here. I guess it says it's to the organizers and panelists here. There's in the news, there's $700,000 in grant awards from Can Do Colorado to fund electric bike adoption. So in the city of Fort Collins, they will have, I believe, 50 or so bikes that are being given out for free to low-income to low-income community members. So what I'm hoping is that we're going to get even more data from that study, and it's going to be for about 3 years that we're getting information from that program.
Okay, great. I do have a quick question. Are there tax credits for used EVs?
There are not. So we are trying to champion those. There's not, and you would think that there should be, and that there would be an easy system because you would just go off of the VIN number. It's very effective when it's a new vehicle, but I'm assuming it's because once you purchase that new vehicle, you're realizing the switch between the old vehicle, getting the old vehicle off of the road with a new, more sustainable vehicle. But I think that there's an argument that can be said that we're reducing enough or as much emissions when it's a used vehicle. So that's probably, maybe next time we can get into exactly how much emissions we're reducing, even if it is a used vehicle. It's a good question.
Okay, well, it looks like unless somebody pops in here really quickly, looks like we're at the end. And just to remind everyone, a recording will be automatically sent out to you. It comes out either later tonight or tomorrow. I have access to all your emails through registration, so I'm going to send out. Diego's going to get me the copy, the dates and information for both ride and drives. I'll also send out a copy of the presentation, and then I will put the information in as well on the Sandbox Solar ribbon cutting on Monday. Hey, I appreciate everyone for joining us tonight, and a big round of thanks for Diego for a great presentation. And it's really important as we move forward, not just with EV adoption, but with the benefits of the energy transition, we have to make sure that everyone benefits equally and equitably from that transition. So everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you,
Diego.
everybody.